Hey kiddos, welcome back for story time. We're gonna keep reading Dr. Proctor's Fart Powder by Joan Nesbo. We are on chapter 6. Conductor Madsen and the Dolgan School Marching Band. Mr. Madsen was standing in the gym with both arms out in front of him. Facing him sat the 20 students who made up the Dolgan School Marching Band. Mr. Madsen squeezed a baton between his right thumb and index finger. His other 8 fingers splayed in all directions. He had closed his eyes, and for a second he imagined he was far away from the bleachers, worn wood floor and stinky gym mats, standing before a sold-out audience in a concert hall in Venice, with chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and cheering people in formal clothes in those balcony seats. Then Mr. Madsen opened his eyes again. "Ready?" he yelled, wrinkling his nose so his dark aviator sunglasses wouldn't slide down, because unlike Mrs. Strobe, Mr. Madsen had a short fat nose with black pores. None of the 20 faces in the chairs in front of him looked like they were ready, but they didn't protest either, so Mr. Madsen counted down as if for a rocket launch. 4, 3, 2, 1! Then Mr. Madsen swung his baton as if it were a magic wand, and the Dolgan School Marching Band began to play. Not like a rocket exactly, more like a train that, snorting and puffing, started to move. As usual, the drums had started playing long before Mr. Madsen got to 1. Now he was just watching for the rest of the band. First came a screech of a trombone, then a French horn bleated in the wrong key, before 2 clarinets played almost the same note. The 2 trumpet players, the twins, Truls and Trim Train, were picking their noses. Finally, Petra managed to get her tuba to make a sound, and Per made a hesitant tap on the bass drum. "No, no, no," Mr. Madsen called, losing hope and waving his baton defensively. But just like a train, the Dolgan School Marching Band was hard to stop once it got going. And when they tried to stop, it sounded like a ton of kitchen implements falling on the floor. Crash, bang, toot! When it was finally quiet and the windows at Dolgan School had stopped vibrating, Mr. Madsen took off his aviator glasses. "My dear ladies and gentlemen," he said, "do you know how many days there are left until Independence Day?" No one said anything. Mr. Madsen groaned. "Well, I wouldn't expect you to either, since you don't seem to know what you're playing. What song is this, Trim?" Trim stopped picking his nose and glanced over at his brother questioning. "Well, Truls," Mr. Madsen said, "can you help Trim out?" Truls scratched his back with his trumpet and squinted at the music stand. "I got some rain on my music, Mr. Madsen. I can't see nothing," he said. "Right," Mr. Madsen said. "For crying out loud, this is the national anthem. Is there really no one here besides Lisa who can read music? Or at least play in key?" Lisa cowered behind her clarinet as she felt everyone else looking at her. She knew what those looks were saying. They were saying that even if Mr. Madsen said she was good, she shouldn't think that any of them wanted to be friends with her. In fact, the opposite was true. "If we don't improve by Independence Day, we're going to have to give up the idea of a band camp this summer," Mr. Madsen said. "I don't want to be made into a laughingstock in front of dozens of other band directors. Understood?" Mr. Madsen saw the faces in front of him start gaping. This was a shock to them, that much was clear. After all, he had talked so much and so positively about the big band competition in Eidsvoll that they were all really looking forward to it. But he had made it clear to them from the very beginning. Nikolai Amadeus Madsen was not playing around, conducting a rattling old military band. So unless a miracle occurred, no one at Eidsvoll was going to hear so much as a triangle claim from the Dolgan School Marching Band. And unfortunately, since Mr. Madsen's baton wasn't a magic wand, there wasn't going to be any miracle. "Let's take it again from the top," Mr. Madsen said with a sigh, raising his baton. "Ready?" But they simply were not ready. In fact, they were all staring at the door to the locker room that was right behind Mr. Madsen's back. Irritated, he turned around, but he couldn't see anyone. He turned back toward the band and was just about to count off when his brain realized that he had seen something in the doorway after all. Something down by the floor. He turned around, took off his sunglasses, and looked at the tiny little boy with the red bangs. "What are you doing here?" Mr. Matson asked curtly. "Shouldn't you ask who I am first?" Nellie said, holding up an old beat-up trumpet. "I'm Nellie. I can play the trumpet. You want to hear me play a little?" "No," Mr. Matson said. "Just a little?" Nellie asked, raising his trumpet and forming his lips as if for a kiss. "No, no, no," growled Mr. Matson, who was bright red in the face and slapping his thigh with the baton. "I am an artist," he yelled. "I have arranged for marches for the big marching band festival in Venice, and now I'm conducting a school band for tone-deaf brats. And I don't need to hear one more tone-deaf brat. Understood? Now get out." Nellie said. "That sounded like an A. I have perfect pitch. Just check with your tuning fork." "You're not only tone-deaf, you're deaf," Mr. Matson sputtered, shaking and spitting in agitation. "Shut that door again and don't ever come back here. Surely you don't think any band would take someone so small that there isn't even room for the stripe on the side of his uniform pants?" Nellie said. "So short that his band medals would drag on the ground? So teensy-weensy that he couldn't see what was on the music stand? Whose uniform hat falls down over his eyes?" Nellie smiled innocently as Mr. Matson, who was now rushing straight toward him in long strides. "So he can't see where he's going," Nellie continued, "and suddenly finds himself on Acre Street while the rest of the band is marching down Carl Johann Street?" "Exactly," Mr. Matson said, grabbing hold of the door and flinging it shut right in Nellie's face. Then he stomped back over to the music stand. He noted the big grins on Trule's and Trim's faces before he raised his baton. "So," Mr. Matson said, "back to the national anthem." There's Nellie, got kicked out of the band. And that is the end of chapter 6. I'm going to see how long. Chapter 7 is short, so we'll read chapter 7 today, too. Chapter 7. That night in a sewer beneath Oslo. There are big animals in the sewers that run every which way beneath Oslo. So big that you probably wouldn't want to bump into them. But if you pick up a manhole cover on one of Oslo's streets and shine a flashlight down into the sewer world, it just may happen that you'll see the light catch the teeth in the jaws of one of the big slimy beasts before it scurries away, or before it sinks its teeth into your throat, because they are quite speedy beasts. And we're not talking now about the regular innocent Rattus norvegicus, i.e. little Norwegian rats, but about properly beastly beasts, like Attila. Attila was an old Mongolian water vole who'd lived for 35 years and weighed more than 30 pounds. If you want to read more about water voles, turn to page 678 in Animals You Wish Didn't Exist. As it so happened, Attila liked to eat a little Rattus norvegicus for breakfast, and it was the king of the Oslo municipal sewer and drainage system. That is to say, Attila thought it was, until now. Attila's reign had started many years ago, but this water vole hadn't always been king. When Attila was a few months old and was a cute tiny fur bowl weighing only a few ounces, it had been bought in a pet store by a family in Hofstadter, Norway. They bought the Mongolian water vole because the fat little boy in the family had pointed at Attila and yelled that he wanted a rat like that, and his parents had done what the little boy ordered. They had fed Attila fish balls, the worst thing Attila knew of, and put a metal collar on the rat with the name Attila engraved on it. And the fat little boy had tormented the poor water vole every single day by poking sticks into the cage. Every single day, until the day Attila had gotten so big from eating fish balls that it needed a new cage, while it could still fit out the opening of the old one. Attila had been looking forward to this day, and when the little boy stuck his hand into the cage to drag Attila out, Attila had opened its mouth as wide as it could and sunk its teeth into the delicious, soft, white human meat. This was a totally different kind of meatball. And while the little boy screamed and his blood gushed, Attila was out of the cage as fast as a Mongolian water vole could go, out of the apartment, away from the above ground part of Hovseter, and down into the sewer. And from there, the water vole had found its way to downtown Oslo, where its beastly behavior had quickly earned the water vole respect. Attila was feared by Norwegian rats citywide, from the manhole covers at Majorstua subway station to the sewage treatment plant at Aker. But on this night, deep beneath Oslo, while Lisa and Nilly were sleeping like babies, it was Attila who was gripped by fear. The vole was sitting in the corner of a sewer pipe shaking, because a flash of light, it had seen something right in front of him. A glimpse of teeth, teeth even bigger than its own. Could the legend he'd been hearing for all these years in the Oslo municipal sewer and drainage system be true after all? Attila felt its Mongolian water vole heart pounding in fear, and it was so dark, so dark. And for the first time, Attila realized it actually smelled pretty bad down here in the sewer, and that it really would prefer to be anywhere else besides the sewer pipe right now, even its old cage in Hovseter. So Attila tried to comfort itself. Obviously the legend must be made up. An anaconda? What baloney! An anaconda is a boa constrictor that is found in the Amazon, where it lives off of huge water voles and such. Not here, deep beneath Oslo, where there aren't any water voles at all, apart from the one that is. Attila contemplated this briefly. And while the water vole was thinking, something moved toward Attila. It was huge, like an inflatable swim ring, surrounded by jagged teeth the size of ice cream cones, and it was hissing and had such bad breath that the rest of the sewer smelled like a flower bed in comparison. It was so frightening that Attila quite simply squeezed its eyes shut. When the vole opened them again, something was dripping and dripping all around, and it was excessively dark, just as if Attila weren't sitting in the sewer pipe, but inside something that was even darker. It was as if the walls were moving, pulling in closer and slithering, as if the water vole were already inside the stomach of Attila screamed at least as loud as that little fat boy he had bitten so long ago. Ooh. Well, this is fun. Now we have like a creepy big snake. Big sewer snake. That's the end of chapter 7, and that's where we're going to end today. And we'll keep reading this book, but this is a fun little development in the book. I thought it was only going to be about fart powder. And now we got some creepy crawlies. Heck yeah. I'll see you guys next week for story time. Bye.